Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabarty, and in the second segment, we are talking about the Indiana Pacers, who just traded for Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors. So we are going to be breaking down how this trade plays out for both teams. Notably, the New Orleans Pelicans were also involved in this trade. Very minimally, but suppose we'll touch on them as well. But starting with the Pacers here, this is an up-and-coming team, one of the, in my opinion, most entertaining teams from this season, just as far as their historically great offense that they have been running so far. And yes, they very clearly, if you've watched any Indiana Pacers basketball, need to improve on the defensive side of the ball. And I'm not totally sure if this move necessarily does that, but it adds a very legitimate talent to this team in, I think importantly, a small market, given the fact that they likely were not huge players for any upcoming free agent stars, and they're trying to build something and establish themselves as a legitimate core front office group and all of that. And I think that they really got a great deal out of this Pascal Siakam move. So just going over some of the details of this move, Pacers receive Pascal Siakam, a two-time All-Star, two-time All-NBA player, as well as a second-round pick from the New Orleans Pelicans. And they did so without giving up very much. The Toronto Raptors, they received Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, Kyra Lewis from the New Orleans Pelicans, and 3 first-round picks. The Pelicans, they mostly just get involved with this deal in order to move Kyra Lewis, just for the sake of getting themselves under the luxury tax. So Lewis wasn't really playing much for this Pelicans team that is also looking to establish themselves. So instead, they get under the luxury tax and sort of have a little bit more flexibility with roster construction moving forward. So on the Pacers side of this, I think that this is almost a no-brainer as long as they are able to re-sign Pascal Siakam. And I thought it was interesting when the news first broke, because I had just seen that Siakam was not going to commit to re-signing with any teams as far as a contract extension during the season, other than the Toronto Raptors, because the Raptors could give him the most amount of money. So he would have accepted that, but other than that, not looking to re-up with any other team and would like to hit free agency. Now, that is still the case for the most part, in that he is hoping to play out the rest of his contract and maximize the opportunity come this summer. That being said, early reports are that he is very excited to join the Pacers. There was even a very interesting report that came out about how Miles Turner, interestingly enough, the center for the Pacers, was his number 2 player that he would like to play with the most in the NBA behind Kevin Durant. Something about the play style, the stretch big, but also the defensive versatility that Turner brings. And I like Turner a lot as a player. I think that this season, now the way that they've sort of worked this out with Sabonis gone, now him being able to play with Tyrese Halliburton is just a huge upgrade when it comes to the fit, because Sabonis and Turner, obviously not exactly the same. The majority of people would take Sabonis over Turner, and that's probably the right opinion. But the two of them playing next to each other, just sort of limited what Turner was able to do himself with that 2-big lineup. And I think that his ability to stretch, even when they play the likes of a Jalen Smith or an Obi Toppin next to him, he's just a lot more able to be unlocked. He can fully be the center with more established roles, but That's a lot of Miles Turner talk right there. More so on the trade itself, I think that this is a very high-paced, fast-break team in the Indiana Pacers. You've seen their elite ability to, off of a miss or a make from the other team, get out in transition and hustle down the floor and beat the opposing team to the rack. I think that they've very much established themselves as one of those elite pace teams, the highest pace in the NBA up to this point in the season, I still believe. And I think that they are just looking to sort of make that extra push because they've been very Tyrese Halliburton-centric. Now, they've actually played better, I think, than a lot of people expected when Tyrese Halliburton went down the other week with a hamstring injury after doing the splits on the court. It looked like it could have been really scary, but he said that he's looking to get back into action soon enough, so it's going to be a little bit of time before we can see Halliburton and Siakam, the two stars, playing with one another, and yet I think that it's still something that's going to be worth the wait because, again, with the pace that they play, and I think that there's going to be a very elite pick-and-roll game. It's maybe a lot to ask mid-season whether or not they can fully figure that out, but I think that it's very possible, and I think that another interesting factor when it comes to this is Pascal. He's sort of been shaky from beyond the three-point line for the majority of his career, but around him, the Pacers players are a very good spacing team, pretty much 1 through 5, given that Miles Turner can shoot, and even guys, like I mentioned, the other sort of bench bigs that they've been kind of plugging away with in the starting lineup, the Jalen Smiths and the Obi Toppins, good enough shooters, and Pascal, he's better from the corner than he is anywhere else beyond that break at the top of the wing and the key, but I think that it's a pretty seamless fit. I think that play style-wise, skill-wise, he sort of fits what the Pacers are looking for. And again, I do just sort of want to harp on the fact that the Indiana Pacers, they have never been a free agent destination through the 2010s when they really established themselves and on when they have been good. It's been with a lot of home drafted talent and sort of making moves around the edges. Paul George was the leader of the charge in that 2010s run when they were making the Eastern Conference Finals and such. And they have made a lot of really good front office moves, I think, up to this point. They revitalized Victor Oladipo when he was sort of seemed to be a throwaway at that point in the Paul George trade. And mentioning that Paul George trade, when the Pacers sent him to Oklahoma City, they got Sabonis, who they then turned into Tyrese Halliburton. So I think that they've done a lot of really good moves, and part of those really good moves is understanding where they come from as an organization, especially these past few years when they've been rebuilding. And a lot of the time, when that's the case, you're going to have to overpay. We saw a similar situation with the Houston Rockets, paying a lot of money to Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks. They signed Bruce Brown to a $20 million deal, and Bruce Brown is a really nice player. I think that he was very vital for the Denver Nuggets in their championship run last year. Still, sort of, you have to give the Nuggets the benefit of the doubt, but Brown, a player that it seems like they're sort of missing, they give Bruce Brown this $20 million deal with a team option because they know that they have the cap space. It does nothing for you if you just hold on to that cap space. It's not like if a Joel Embiid or if a Giannis were to become available that they would be any sort of a number one destination. And so they give the money out to Bruce Brown, and Brown has played a pretty meaningful role for the Pacers this season. Brings in that championship experience, but not only that, it gives a very movable contract at a larger number to trade for the likes of a Pascal Siakam. So I think that the way that the front office has navigated this whole thing has been phenomenal, and they have to get credit. Now, if we're talking front offices here, I think that the Raptors, I understand the move where they came from, especially considering the news around Pascal Siakam. He was disheartened with the team when he learned that he was in trade talks prior, and that he is an upcoming free agent. Unless he was getting the highest possible dollar amount, he was not going to stay with the Raptors. It seemed like that relationship was sort of skewed between the two parties. So you can, of course, naturally argue about their decisions between Masai Ujiri and the Toronto Raptors front office decisions from last year, when there were rumors flying everywhere about the trade value of the likes of Siakam and OG Anunoby, where it was talking about 3-4 first-round picks for him, which is crazy to me, but that's also, the price of a highly talented wing, and they chose to sit on it, and in return, the value diminished. Now, I didn't mind. I actually, in fact, liked the return that they got for OG in their trade a few weeks ago with the New York Knicks getting Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. But here for Siakam, I don't think that they really maximized it. Now, again, we're talking about an upcoming free agent. Stories coming out about him not being willing to commit to sign anywhere. So those are definitely red flags if you're another team. How much can you fully get from, how much are you going to be willing to give up, more like, if you don't know exactly whether or not the player is going to stay. Now, this package that the Pacers sent out, again, could be a lot if Siakam decides that he doesn't want to stay in Indiana. But I do think that the Pacers have the advantage of having a little bit of intel, given the fact that, interestingly enough, Pascal Siakam's agent, his second biggest client, is Andrew Nembhard, a guard on the Pacers. So I feel like they likely have a little bit of insight into this, and part of the reason why they were willing to make this deal. Now, 3 first-round picks does seem like a lot, but if you actually look at the details of what these picks are, it's the Pacers pick from this season, which Indiana, especially after acquiring Siakam, likely going to be a playoff team. It is the worst option in this year's draft between the Utah Jazz's pick, the LA Clippers' pick, and the Houston Rockets' pick. So probably looking like the Clippers' pick, which, again, probably going to be a late first. And then a conditional pick from the Pacers in 2026. So the Raptors have historically done pretty well for themselves in those later picks. I mean, Siakam was in the 20s in his draft, and I do like Masai Ujiri as a GM for the most part, so I'm not saying these are nothing picks. I feel like, me personally, though, I just prefer to get a more tangible return. That's why I like the Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett return for OG Anunoby. And I feel like if you're the Raptors here, I mean, yeah, you get Kira Lewis. I liked Kira Lewis when he was coming out of Alabama. He was a late lottery pick in 2020, but hasn't really shown much since then. And I sort of thought the Raptors would be in play for acquiring a Jarris Walker, the Pacers rookie that they took in the top 10 this year. Young player, two-way ability, potential at least, and he really hasn't been getting a lot of minutes with the Pacers this season as they try and establish themselves as more of a legit contender is probably strong, but a real playoff threat at least. And just to not get any real solidified pieces back now, Bruce Brown, because he's on this very tradable deal, again, with the team option and everything, And given the $20 million, I think that it's very likely that he's rerouted to a contender who can maybe sell off a young piece. So the Raptors may not have fully acquired their end results yet with this deal, but I guess that's just still to be determined in the future here. And that is all we have on this topic.